Hello everyone, and welcome to part 9 of my Wrestlemania MVP LVP series, where I take a look at every Wrestlemania in history and choose the most valuable player and least valuable player from each and every event. Like I said, this is part 9. We've got 2 more to go after this one, and we've got 3 Wrestlemanias lined up today, and they're 3 very different ones in terms of my opinions on them. We're going to start off with one that I think is pretty bad and one that I don't have that high of an opinion of. You got one that I thought was pretty good and I have a lot of nice things to say about. And you have another one that I saw very early in my wrestling fandom, so I have a lot of nostalgic feelings for it. So we're going to go across the spectrum of all different opinions and feelings in choosing most valuable players and least valuable players from all of these events. So let's start off with the low end of the spectrum. WrestleMania 27, which was not a good show. It was actually the first WrestleMania I reviewed as part of this channel. It was the first, within my first year of making YouTube videos, it was the first WrestleMania I reviewed and did a video review of. One of my worst videos, because A, I was still early into doing this whole thing, and B, I was sick as a dog when I filmed it, so I just sounded, it's like, alright, I'm sick as a dog, and I was crotchety as hell because I was sick, and because I didn't like the show. So I was just like, I was grumpy, I was mean, I was sour, and I felt like I came across like an asshole in that video. But I was just like, dude, I'm sick and I didn't like the show. So it was just bad news bears all around. But yeah, choosing an MVP for WrestleMania 27 is like picking the top student in remedial reading class. It's like, is it really that big of a deal? This was a show I was not a huge fan of for a multitude of reasons. If you're curious, go back and watch that earlier review if you can stomach it. And you did have the Undertaker Triple H match, which was not one of my favorite matches, but it's the best match on this show. You had CM Punk and Randy Orton, which I thought was a good match, and full credit to Punk for at least apparently he reminded them that Orton was the one that cost him the title back in 2008, and they used that as kind of the motivation for CM Punk doing what he did to Randy Orton and like the main crux of the feud. So points to him for that. I thought the match was good too. One of the better matches on the show. Other than that, it's a little dry. So for MVP, I'm gonna go with The Rock because he was the guest host of the show and was really the main selling point. And really, it was the appeal of a potential Cena versus Rock match down the road after WrestleMania that made this WrestleMania interesting. I remember hearing the comment that this was a, quote, throwaway WrestleMania to get to WrestleMania 28 when they do Cena and Rock. And I'm like, I've never heard of a show referred to as a throwaway WrestleMania before, but that's what we got it. But Rock being the guest host of this event did provide that intrigue and did provide that element in the story where you got to get to Cena versus Rock at some point. So, so Rock was the most important part of the show, I guess. This was also Edge's last match and last WrestleMania, so, but not the most glorious way to go out either, so, there's that. But yeah, I'm gonna give MVP to The Rock. I don't like this WrestleMania. I really don't. And least valuable player, I could have gone into the Michael Cole versus Jerry Lawler match, which is my pick for the worst match in WrestleMania history. It went on too long. It wasn't funny. The build-up was extremely annoying. There was just nothing about it to enjoy. Nothing. And it was funny because at the time I had WWE fans defending it to me. Like, no, it's going to be great when they do it at Mania. It's going to be great. The match is going to be great. It's going to be great fun and all this other stuff. And it turned out to be the worst match ever. I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that feud was worth it. I'm so glad that I watched that match after putting up with all the annoying bickering back and forth between the two for entire episodes of Raw. It was so great that they did that. So yeah, I just hated that match and everyone involved in it, from Stone Cold Steve Austin to Jack Swagger, who was in Cole's corner, to the anonymous Raw GM who awarded the win to Michael Cole because fuck you, that's why. Got subjected to that whole thing, and Jerry Lawler didn't even win. It's like, god damn you. It's like, what a giant waste of time that was. And I just, Jerry Lawler for participating in it. I just hated everything about this match. But because of that, I'm going to give least valuable player to Michael Cole, the guy that was the most focused on heel / character on the entire show leading up to WrestleMania. It was unbelievable. Like, they put so much build-up into a fight between the two announcers, and it became like, it was the most heavily built match on the show, and I was like, what the fuck are they doing? Like, I mean, it's WrestleMania, and your big match is the fight between the announcers? I mean, could you imagine if, like, WrestleMania 6 was built around, like, Gorilla Monsoon versus Bobby Heenan, or Jesse Ventura, or something like that? It's like, fuck the wrestlers, we just want to have a match between the announcers. I was like, that's good for a popcorn match and a laugh. It's not good to build an entire show around that. I mean, Jesus. Holy Moses. And for some reason, somebody got the idea in their head that Michael Cole as a heel would be, like, the greatest and most funniest thing ever. And as with most things, they went too far with it, and it got overexposed and oversaturated. And by the time WrestleMania rolled around, I was just sick of listening to the whole thing. It was just the most irritating thing ever. But yeah, so Michael Cole, least valuable player of WrestleMania 27. Now, who's going to be the most valuable player of WrestleMania 21? Like I said, this was a pretty good WrestleMania. It had its hiccups that kept it from being one of the best, but I overall thought it was a really good show. It was a lot of really good things on it. You had the Undertaker versus Randy Orton match, which I really enjoyed. Edge winning the first Money in the Bank, which was good. Eddie Ray was solid. You had the Hulk Hogan Hassan segment, which was good. So there's a lot of good stuff on there. You also had, for historical purposes, you had John Cena and Batista winning their first world titles as well. So they were crowned as like the new leaders of the WWE, the new generation, if you will. And yeah, I could go MVP with a lot of those guys, but I'm going to lean towards what I felt was the best match on the show, the Shawn Michaels-Kurt Angle match. And I thought both guys did amazingly well in this match. I'm going to give the MVP to Kurt Angle. I could give it to Shawn. I could just as easily give it to both guys, but I'm going to give it to Kurt because he, up to this point, in my opinion, he had never had that true blue WrestleMania classic. And I know the match with Benoit at 17 was decided to be the number 10th best match in WrestleMania history when WWE did their big top 10 WrestleMania match special heading into WrestleMania 20. And I was like, really? I don't even think that's in my top 20. It's a good match. I don't think it's like a masterpiece or anything. It's a perfectly serviceable mid-card match. I didn't think it was anything that great. Not an epic encounter by any stretch of the imagination. I think Angle and Benoit had much better matches after this, to be perfectly honest. And, the three-way at 2000 with Jericho and Benoit was, again, good. One of the better parts of that extremely weak show, but not like a true blue Mania classic. It was just a good, solid match on a show that didn't have a lot of good, solid matches. And the match with Kane at 18 was meh. The match with Lesnar, where they main evented at 19, I felt was massively overrated. Massively overrated. I mean, they botched the finish, for Christ's sake. It's like, how can you tell me that's one of the greatest matches of all time when they botched the finish? And when I get to WrestleMania 19, you might be surprised of who my MVP is. But, yeah, I didn't think that match was a classic. I didn't think the match with Eddie at 20, I thought was, again, it was good, but there was something off about the chemistry between Eddie and Angle, and I don't know what it was, but you would expect those two to have, like, these amazing matches, and they were just kind of okay for the most part. I thought their SummerSlam match later that year in 04 was even worse. Like, it was just kind of like this weak sauce match. I'm like, man, what's Eddie and Angle? They just didn't click, and their Mania match was good. It wasn't anything spectacular or overly memorable. It was just a good, solid match. Nowhere near as good as the main event. Nowhere near as memorable as even the Evolution Rock and Sock match. I thought was more memorable than that. So, again, it was just a good, solid match. But it was better than Goldberg-Lesnar. I'll give them that. It was certainly better than that. And now you have 21. So up to this point, I feel like Angle has never had like that show-stealing WrestleMania match, despite what everybody says on the internet. There's like, oh my God, Kurt Angle's the greatest, and every match he has is 4 or 5 stars. And I'm like, yeah, he's had his great matches, but he's never had. I don't think he's ever had a Mania Classic up to this point, and he's had some matches that weren't that great. Look at the match with Kane in 18. That match wasn't that great. But this match was really, really good. And granted, yeah, I know he's working with Shawn Michaels, but I thought both styles really complemented each other really, really well. And I thought they had an amazing match together. You had the high-flying style of Shawn Michaels. You had the more Olympic style of Kurt Angle. And I thought the whole match was about them trying to dictate the pace and work their own style and force their own style on the other competitor. And I thought the match worked out very well in doing that. And Kurt Angle got the win, but ultimately it was really like, this was Kurt's crowning WrestleMania match for me, because this was his one true blue WrestleMania classic. Like this one was a classic. This one was great. This was an outstanding match. Best match on the show. And because it was like, for me personally, it was like, oh, Kurt finally had that WrestleMania classic that I've been looking for. I'm going to give him the MVP for that. With Shawn at like the close second. It's because Shawn Michaels turning in yet another fantastic WrestleMania performance. But I'm going to give it to Kurt, because this was really kind of his night in the sun, or day in the sun, or whatever, for me personally at least. So he gets the MVP for WrestleMania 21. Least valuable player for WrestleMania 21. Like I said, there were some things that didn't work on this show. I could go, I talked about John Cena earlier, but that match he had with JBL was so anticlimactic. It's like, I cannot believe that is Cena's first title win. Like, really? I mean, my God, like, the Hogan-Sheik match where Hogan won the belt, that at least had Hogan breaking out of the camel clutch. So it's like, okay, Hogan survived the thing that Bob Backlund couldn't. So it was, Hogan had to overcome that hurdle to prove himself to be the champion, and he did. Cena he just straight up beat him with no outside interference, no fluky bullshit, nothing. And it's like, dude, anybody could beat JBL. We knew that. That's how his title reign was booked. But where were the cheat tactics? Where was the cheating? Where was the outside interference? Where was all this other stuff? And without that stuff, Cena just kind of not steamrolled him, but he just kind of beat him, and then that was that. It was just a very flat, anticlimactic match. To 10 months of JBL as champion. So JBL for being the champion in that situation, I could give him least valuable player as well. I was also thinking I could go towards Christy Hemme, who was put in there with Trish Stratus, which he had absolutely no business being put in there. No knock on Christy. She was just really, really green at this point, and I don't believe she'd ever had, like, an actual match beyond, like, the typical evening gown or bra and panties type of stuff. And Trish did the best she could to make it work, but it was just kind of like, you could tell that Christy was not well polished, and it was just kind of like, okay, why'd you even do this? You couldn't find like a real wrestler to put up against Trish. I mean, it had to be Christy because she did the Playboy thing. Okay. I thought about giving least valuable player to Rey Mysterio's mask, which kept giving him problems in the opening bout. Again, that's still a good match, but it was like Rey was kind of fumbling around for his mask a little bit, and I was like, man, it's like his mask, least valuable player on the show. But I think I'm going to focus least valuable player on the sumo match, which, I get why they did it. I get that it was an attraction, but it didn't play real well, and it wasn't very entertaining to watch. So I could give it to Akebono, or I could give it to Big Show. Akebono, I'm going to give somewhat of a pass because he just does what he does. He did exactly what he was brought in there to do. Why Vince wanted to do that, I don't know, but that's a thing that they did. Poor Big Show, who I'm going to give, I guess I'm going to kick him while he's down. Poor Big Show's going to get least valuable player here. Through no fault of his own, he was just put into a bad situation and had to make the most out of it. And they put him in a sumo thong because, of course, they did. Yokozuna wore tights underneath the sumo thong. I'm just saying. They were kind enough to do that with Yokozuna, but they couldn't do it with Akebono and Big Show. So you got two big fat guys in thongs just slapping each other. WrestleMania. That's what I want to see. But I know there was a reason why they did this, for the cross-promotional appeal and there was an attraction there for the Japanese markets and whatever. I get all that. It was just, it didn't play well. And poor Big Show had to be the chump in the whole thing. So, I'm going to give least valuable player with much sorrow and great apologies towards the Big Show, who was the poor unfortunate soul put into a terrible situation. And no, I did not need to see Big Show in a sumo thong. That was horrifying. But let's close out with WrestleMania 5, where the Mega Powers exploded. We had Hulk Hogan versus Randy Savage in the main event of the show, and there were other good things on this show. I thought the tag team division was very well represented here. You had Rockers versus Twin Towers. You had Strike Force versus the Brain Busters. You had Heart Foundation was featured. You had the Fabulous Rougeos versus the Bushwhackers, for those of you who wanted to see that match. And you had Demolition getting their revenge on Mr. Fuji in the tag title match. So the tag division was very well represented on this show. And they got to have some really good matches and some good moments. As far as Demolition is concerned, it was a great moment. As far as Twin Towers and Rockers and Brainbusters and Strike Force, they had really good matches, with a big turn with Martel turning on Tito in that one. So that was one of the better matches on the show. But there were some other things as well. You had Roddy Piper making his return with that great Piper's Pit segment where he bitched out Brother Love and God, I've already forgotten his Downey Jr., Morton Downey Jr. Like, I forgot the dude's name. He was like famous for 15 minutes. He was one of those guys. But yeah, I thought the Piper's Pit segment went well. I thought Ultimate Warrior and Rick Rude had a really good match, surprisingly really good match for the IC title, which had, like, the way the crowd reacted to that match, you would have thought it was the main event. Like, it had that, like, that level of heat to it. And you had Bobby Heenan, who was all over the place. He participated in the IC title match. He managed Haku in the opener. He managed the Brainbusters. He had a match himself against the Red Rooster where he lost in 30 seconds. So, there were a lot of different ways I could go with the main event, or with the most valuable player, but I feel like I had to go with the main event, specifically the three main players. You had Hulk Hogan, who was going in as the babyface, taking on his former friend, Randy Savage, who turned on him and was going to win the belt for the second time. Actually went on to win the belt for the second time. You had Miss Elizabeth, who was in a neutral corner supporting both men and was very key in causing a lot of the conflict of the angle. So her mere presence was very important to the proceedings of the angle, the story, and the match. But really, like I said with Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 1, a great story needs a great villain, and it even helps more when you understand where the villain is coming from. Macho Man Randy Savage, the defending WWF champion, is going to be my MVP for WrestleMania 5. The heel turn was beautifully executed. The whole storyline and angle with the Mega Powers was awesome. Very well done from start to finish. One of the best storylines WWE ever did, in my opinion. It's up there. Like, it's, to me, like the rise and fall of the Mega Powers, if that's not the number one greatest storyline that WWE ever did, then it's Austin McMahon. Those are the two that stand out to me. It's like, those are the two best storylines that the WWE/WWF ever did. And I think all three players, Hogan, Liz, and Savage, deserve a ton of credit for making that angle work as well as it did. And Savage in particular, because even though he turned on Hogan and he beat him up backstage and he threw Elizabeth, like that part where he picks up Elizabeth, where Elizabeth is like shielding Hogan and Randy like picks her up and throws her across the room, that looked sick. I mean, that looked pretty like intense. But you understood where he was coming from because the fame of Hulk Hogan was kind of eclipsing him, and he was the champion. Hogan was always getting the not sneaky, but he was always like getting the wins in their tag matches, and he was getting all the attention. And then you had the stuff with Elizabeth. You got lust in your eyes for Elizabeth. Yeah, I can see it. You got the lust in your eyes, Hulk Hogan. Yeah. The jelly, but you understood why he was jealous, and I think that motivation made the story more interesting. It wasn't just, oh, I'm turning on him because it feels like it. It was, no, he was motivated. Larry Zbyszko turned on Bruno Sammartino because there was a distinct motivation there that made sense. And it made sense here as well. And those are the best heel turns, when it makes sense. Hollywood Hogan joining the NWO made sense when you look at how the crowds were starting to react to Hogan and how his reputation had been sullied with the steroid trial and everything else. It was only natural to go in that direction with Hogan. Bret Hart becoming a heel in America made perfect sense. They turned against Bret, sided with Austin. Bret's like, what's wrong with you? You're all a bunch of immoral degenerates. And I'm going to be a hero to the rest of the world, but fuck America. That made sense. And those are the best heel turns. So I think that Randy did an amazing job here in not only selling the story of the match, but also performing in this match. Thought he did exceptionally well. He got to main event his second WrestleMania in a row. And in those early WrestleManias, Savage really was kind of what Shawn Michaels would ultimately become. He was that show stealer guy. Like, yeah, you can say that Hogan drew the shows, but Savage was the guy typically having the best match. Whether it be WrestleMania 3 with Ricky Steamboat, or with Warrior at WrestleMania 7, or with Flair at WrestleMania 8, even though they were the title match. And here it was like, this felt like, it's like, okay, let's put him with Hogan and make him like the central figure of the whole storyline, and it worked beautifully, I thought. So, great match, great main event, and great performance from Savage, and he really was the one that sold me on this whole story. And this match is also special to me because it's the first wrestling match I ever saw, period. I saw highlights of this match on TV one day, and I was like, what is this? And why? And it was one of those moments where I just clicked in my brain, and I was like, I want to watch more of this. Like, I'm watching this crazy guy in orange tights, like, beat up this good guy in the yellow tights, and there's a woman involved, and the psycho's acting all crazy and stuff, and the announcers are making fun of and insulting each other. It's like, what am I watching? This stuff is great. It's insane, but it's great. My 4-year-old or 5-year-old brain couldn't handle it. But yeah, so a lot of nostalgic memories for this one, and Savage was the centerpiece of this whole thing, and he was the glue that held it all together and made it work. And again, one of those cases where the cream rose to the top. Yeah, definitely the cream rose to the top. But yeah, that's all I got for you now. That concludes part 9 of this video series for WrestleMania MVP and LVPs. We've got 2 more to go, so we're getting close to the end here as we inch ever so closely to WrestleMania 34. So that is all I have for you now. Y'all enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll have more videos lined up for you later this week, so stay tuned for those.